Good morning, everyone.
He's in his 60s, yeah.
Yeah, he's probably 2 years younger than me, brother.
Yeah, he's right in between me and Don. Right in between.
Got to me. Yes, day before yesterday, wasn't it?
Friday.
I was on that ladder.
Yes, it was Friday, yes.
Friday. We got a little step ladder in here, and you know, my brothers had accidents on ladders, and being an HR, I see people off work all the time where they fall off ladders and everything. So I am extremely careful when I'm messing with a ladder, because I know how bad it has hurt people and even destroyed their careers and everything else, because they couldn't walk afterwards and things. And so I'm on the little step ladder, only about 3 foot high, and I'm getting down, and I look down, and nothing is under me, which I always look down. I never go down a ladder without looking. Somehow or another, pebbles came right up under me, put my foot right down on her body, and I felt it. My full weight, and my feet just went out from under me, and I knocked a few things around.
Yeah, you did.
Stove, and hit the stove, the handle on the stove, so right where the handle hit me in the back, it's excruciating. For the last couple of days, this morning it's better, So I know it's just a bruise and not fractured ribs or anything. It would hurt a whole lot longer than 2 days. And so Pebbles got me for all the times that I have made her feel second place. She's been an excellent dog. So it's good to be here this morning, and what we're doing, we're working on my kitchen and stripping it out and putting some things back in new. And so that's the work we're doing, and that's Brother Allen is helping me, and that's why he said I'm killing him. Yeah, we are having some fun. Yeah. So, good morning.
Pulling her by the ear.
So last Friday evening, we just had some discussion. I think it's on.
Oh, it was on. I'm sorry. It was.
It was. Is it showing that it's going up? Yeah, it's going up. Okay. Okay. So last Friday we talked some and kind of took the line of thought, 2020, the year of vision, and we showed how the light, and by moving into new light, what that means too is new darkness. For unknown, changing it to light. And so I went through 7 women in the book of Genesis, and that's Tamar and Asneth. Those 7 women, you'll find them in the Bible. Eve was the type of the darkness. Noah's wife, the elements, she changed the earth. Him and her together changed the earth completely. Sarah was time. Her seed would go out through time and experience, and that is Isaac setting up and going into signs that were prophesied of him and putting them into form. And Rachel, Laban made Jacob and gave him Leah after 7 years. He had to go another 14. Jacob, in total unrest and anger, took everything Laban owned, more or less, by trickery. And so it was a whole time of unrest. And Tamar, which was Isaac had Jacob, Jacob had Judah, and Judah had these 3 sons that he had. His oldest married Tamar, and when he married Tamar, I think his name is Or, he took sick and died. So then Judah gave Tamar his second son, and his second son didn't like the fact that he wasn't bringing forth his own seed, because according to the Old Testament laws and things, if you had a brother that died, then you went and took his place, and any seed that you have with that wife would be your older brother's seed. And didn't like it, so he wouldn't give her seed, and the Lord became displeased with him and killed him. Yeah, the Lord killed him. A lot of people get real upset about that. Say the Lord wouldn't do such a thing, but anyway, I'll leave that one alone. And so Tamar just decided, I love my husband, and I'm going to preserve his seed one way or another. So, Judah wouldn't give her his 3rd son, and Judah said, you put your widow's clothes on, you live in the tent, I'll take care of you, but you are not, I'm not going to give you my 3rd son. I'm afraid he'll die too. You've already went through 2 of them. And so he didn't give her to his 3rd son, and Tamar just said, well, if I got to preserve seed. She went outside the word, and that's what I was getting at, was once you come to enlightenment, you don't sit around trying to be a theophany civilization, and you don't sit around trying to be a spoken word civilization. And and the civilization that you're in. And if that means that you can't live up to the word, many people write me and they say, Brother Parnell, I love this message, but it seems like we're bringing forth things that are not word. And I always write them back and say, great, it's about time that you brought forth something besides some thinking of the past where you were at 1,000,000 years ago, and try to bring forth something today. And so Tamar did that. She took off her widow's clothes. She put on a prostitute's clothes because that's what she needed to be in order to get her seed. And she waited until Judah came down to shear the sheep. It was sheep shearing season. And she went out and found Judah. And she was dressed in prostitute's clothes. She didn't look like Tamar. And Judah went in with her and spent the night. And before he was ready to leave, Tamar, can you leave me a token? And of course Judah said, well, sure. And he took his ring off and gave it to her, and she staff too. So Judah gave her his staff and his ring, and he left. And one of the servants of Judah came and said, I know Tamar's in the tent with her widow's clothes on, but she hadn't been the widow she ought to be. She's pregnant. She's got a child. And Judah said, I will burn her alive. And so you can read all this in Genesis 30. Burn her alive. So he calls her out of the tent. He goes where she's at with all of his, and he tells her she's been no widow and how ungodly she's been. And he said, you know, have you got anything to say to yourself before I burn you? And Tamar said, yeah, I do have something to say. She said, I just want to say before you burn me, a person whose child this is in me, this is his ring and this is his staff. Like, oh my God, this is the lady. And she said, and he said, you are more righteous than I. Doing what he needed to do to preserve seed, and Tamar wasn't afraid of it. She didn't care. She didn't care what she had to be. She wanted, for the love of her husband, for the he was refused from the brethren. She went to the Lord, Judah, the Lord of it all, and that's what we've done. You know, we've come through prostitutes' clothes and everything else, but it's brought us to enlightenment. And then, of course, you go to Asenath, who was the name Asenath means queen of not Joseph, but daughter of Pharaoh, and the wife of Joseph. For those of you that don't know whose wives, of course, Eve was Adam's wife. And then there was Noah's wife. Sarah was Abraham's. Rebecca was Isaac. Rachel was Jacob's. Tamar was Er's or Or's. And then went in with Judah in the seed line. And Asenath is Joseph's. And I stopped at those ladies for a reason, because this morning I wanted to come back to some prophecies and things. And just lay these out to you and help you in some way, hopefully, understand that we're beyond a lot of prophecies that people think are going to come to pass. They're expecting someday for the Lion of the tribe of Judah to come back into the earth. And so we come down to Asenath, the wife of Joseph. And if you remember, if you were on with us Friday night, Joseph got sold by his brethren into Egypt, went into Potiphar's house, went into the prison. I'm not going to go through all those details. Came out of the prison based on a butler's prophecy about what happened in prison with him. The Pharaoh had a dream, and he dreamed that there were seven heavy cows, healthy cows, and then 7 cows under famine. And he didn't know what it meant. And the butler said, hey, there's a guy down here in prison that there was almost the same type of dream with fruit and so forth. And he told me that I would come back here and serve you again. And he told your baker he was going to get hung. And it happened exactly the way he told it. So Pharaoh said, go get this guy. Joseph came in and Pharaoh tells the dream to him, and Joseph says, oh, I understand that. He said, you're going to have 7 years of really, really great harvest in Egypt. But then you're going to have 7 years of famine. And what you better do is, while you got 7 years of harvest, you had better build storage places, store the food, put the grain in it, so that when we hit the 7 years of famine, people won't starve to death. We can distribute this grain. And Pharaoh said, this is a man of wisdom, and changed his name to Zephaniah, which in the Egyptian language is the revealer of secrets. And so he said, I'm going to give you my ring. I'm going to set you on my throne. And when I set you on my throne, the only person that's going to be above you is me. You got the whole land. It's all yours. And so Joseph went in to Egypt, and of course you read where that Pharaoh had a daughter. Her name was Asenath, and he gave his daughter to Zephaniah or Joseph, and he gave them. She was the queen over the pyramids, the whole land of the pyramids in there, a region. Goshen is where it was at. And so he said, Joseph, that's your inheritance. Take your family. And the family all went to Goshen and lived there and grew up there. And after 400 years, you know the deliverance that Moses brought. But anyway, Asenath was a daughter of Pharaoh and wife of Joseph. And so when I come to this point, it got me kind of thinking, and I was looking through some scripture, because it's always kind of puzzled me. Some scriptures where you read where that it says, O Bethlehem of Judah, out of you shall come forth a king that will rule Israel. And there's many prophecies throughout the Bible where Jesus would come out of Judah. And so then I also read a lot of prophecies in the Bible that said that the promised seed line, the bloodline, would come out of Ephraim. Mm-hmm. And we know that Joseph had 2 sons with Asenath. After coming through darkness and the elements and times and science and unrest and enlightenment, you come to understanding, or a rest, or an understanding of who you are. And Joseph came in with Asenath and took on all the authority of the pyramids and Goshen and everything else, and he was ruler over Egypt. And when he came in with Asenath, he had 2 sons, and it was Ephraim and Manasseh. And Ephraim was the firstborn, and then of course there was Manasseh, and so it was Manasseh and then Ephraim. Mm-hmm. And so it came to a time that, because Ephraim was hidden, I'll get into that in just a minute. Ephraim's whole project, or his whole being, or what he was going to produce, was totally hidden. So anyway, Joseph, his 2 sons grow up, and they are a mix between Egyptian and Jewish, or Hebrew, if you want to call it that. So he had 2 sons, and they were a mix. And when this mix took place, that's what the Lord was blessing in the earth. And it was a mix. Actually, his sons were Gentiles. They weren't Hebrews. But the blessing of the Spirit was upon them, because that's where understanding will bring you. It's a blessing upon all of heaven and earth. It's not just a blessing on Hebrews, or a blessing on the bride, or a blessing on whatever you might want to call it, special prophets, special this, special that. The spirit of Joseph had went out into the earth, and it was a blessing upon all seed, Gentile and Hebrew, Greek, right on down the line. It's a blessing all the way through. So when he had these 2 sons, there come a time that he wanted them blessed. And he asked Jacob to come and bless him, his father. And so Jacob, he came to Manasseh and Ephraim, and he took the hands and crossed them to bless them. And in so doing, it gave Ephraim the firstborn blessing. And of course Joseph said, "Not so, Father, not so. Don't do it." And he said, "I've already done it. The Holy Spirit has led me to do this." And so there was a hidden thing in that blessing from Jacob to Joseph, and that was that Joseph's seed, Ephraim, would be the firstborn of that seed, and it would be a blessing throughout the earth. So when I read those things, even as a young man, I would read the Bible and I'd look at that and I'd think, what's going on? I remember Brother Ephraim Yansa, because it looks like in the scripture that Ephraim's not the one that's blessed, so to speak. And he would write me and he would say, "Do I need to change my name?" And he said, "Ephraim's not blessed of the Lord." And so I would write him back and say, no, that's just a type. That's all it is. But in my heart, I knew there was something laying there about Ephraim that the Lord wanted to reveal. And so I just kept telling him, "No, just keep your name. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about what," because there were preachers, they would say, he was with Don Parnell and he's Ephraim and he isn't blessed. So that would bother him, us not coming to a full revelation yet and a full understanding of who we are. So Joseph's sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, what happened was, we come down to that time, and I went ahead and you know the scriptures that discuss Judah, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, in the 5th chapter of Revelations. You go back in Bethlehem of Judah in Micah, the 5th chapter, I think. Anyway, there are all kinds of scriptures that bring Christ out of Judah. And when Jesus came, he was, of course, the Son of the Spirit, but Joseph and Mary were of the tribe of Judah. But yet his name was Joseph. And so there was a double secret there, laying there the whole time. Yes, Christ would come out of Judah, which Joseph was, but the name Joseph, the blessing of all of it, was laying upon his natural father, if you want to call him that, stepfather, whatever you want to call him. And it was laying there the whole time, and us not realizing it. Well, when you come over here and you read in Jeremiah and the 9th verse, "I am a father to Israel." This is the Lord speaking. "And Ephraim is my firstborn." Now, wait a minute. But Ephraim is my firstborn. Ephraim is the one, the birthright of a firstborn. A promise Christ would come through Ephraim. That was a promise. We know the promises of Judah. Every preacher and God-forsaken person in the world has carried on about Judah forever. But here, what I see is there was a promise where that he would come through Judah. It's just like these bunch of ministers throughout the world. They'll preach about something that happened thousands of years ago, but they don't know how to preach about what's happening today or talk about what's happening today. It's always history with them. So Christ, the head, came through the first time through Judah. He moves through Judah, through the scepter. You know the scripture that talks about, the scepter of Judah should be upon your head in the book of Genesis, and out of Judah will come forth that child in Genesis. And so Judah received a promise in Genesis. He received it again in Micah. He received it again in Revelation 5. And so Christ the head came the first time through Judah. It happened. He came through the line of Judah, and even Paul says over in Hebrews the 7th chapter that Judah, he said the priesthood sprung out of Judah, and no one realized what was going to happen to them, and the priesthood sprung out of Judah and brought on a new priesthood and ended the old priesthood. And he talks about how Christ came out of Judah. And so, but I read where he also said in Jeremiah 31:9, and there's other scriptures, I just wrote this one down real fast, and it says that Ephraim would be the firstborn. That's where the blessing would come from. Mm-hmm. So he will come through the body, the birthright holder, Ephraim, the second time. Oh, Brother Parnell, we know when he comes back he's going to be the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Well, what I know is that Ephraim has a promise, and the second time that the Lord comes, he's to come through Ephraim. He came through Judah the first time. The redemption of God's people is a two-part work. How many knows what two parts those are? Natural and spiritual. He's redeeming the natural man, how many knows what redeem means? Just set something back into its rightful position. If this 7-Up bottle, I just moved it from right there. That was its position. Now, if I'm going to redeem, put it right there. That bottle has been redeemed. There's not much to redemption, really.
Right.
It's just setting everything back into its original position. Right. And when people start thinking of redemption as some big process, it's not. It's just a process. Moved out of it, and you are redeemed. You're brought back. So we have this going on, and Ephraim, the second time, the redemption work was to come through Ephraim. 1 Samuel 17:12. David's daddy, Jesse. Mm-hmm. Read it. It says he was an Ephrathite. He came out of Ephraim. Oh, but I thought David's daddy was out of Judah. David's daddy, Jesse, an Ephrathite, lived in Bethlehem of Judah, is what the scripture says in 1 Samuel 17:12. So he was a dad coming out of the seed line of Ephraim, but he had upon him the blessing of Judah because he lived in Bethlehem of Judah. And Romans 1:3 says Jesus came through that bloodline. That's what it says. And you say, Brother Parnell, are you saying the bloodline of Jesus came through? I'm saying there was a natural bloodline through Judah, and there is just as important a bloodline, spiritual bloodline, through Ephraim. And Ephraim is the blessing of the day. So we have 1 Samuel 17:12. We had Jeremiah 31:9. Ephrathites, or Ephraim's seed line, was to be blessed. And of course we know that the second coming of Jesus Christ was to Ephraim, or to the sons of Joseph. How many remembers William Branham screaming for years, Joseph is coming, Joseph is coming, and out dropped a natural seed line of William Branham and named his name Joseph. And everybody looks to the natural seed line and says, Joseph's a blessing, Joseph's going to do this, Joseph is a prophet, Joseph. I don't disagree with any of that. That's not my place to say what he is. But I know what a spiritual seed line is. And William Branham makes a statement 2 or 3 different times that Joseph was a spiritual happening in the earth. And so many of the people are looking at a natural seed line that's happening spiritually. And the spiritual seed line of what's going on, the blessing of Joseph upon the earth, of course, in type or in symbolism, would be the son Joseph. So he's going to be blessed. He's going to have storage bins. He's going to have spoken word tabernacles. He's going to have voice of God books, and he's going to send them all over the earth. And he's going to, because it is grain inside, it's symbolic of that grain inside the storage units that Joseph told Pharaoh to build for when it comes a time of a famine. But I am not eating from a natural grain line, and I'm not eating from natural grain, and I'm not worried about how many Voice of God buildings are set up and everything. Great work, but that's his. What I find of Joseph through the blessing of the spiritual firstborn blessing in the earth, it's Ephraim, and we're walking home and understanding this now and coming to an understanding that it's not Hebrews, it's not Jews, it's not Greeks, it's not Gentiles, so to speak. It's none of those things. It's a spiritual blessing, and is spiritually among us and bringing us into a greater understanding of the coming of the Lord was a spiritual blessing into the earth. Pentecost. And from Pentecost it has continued on, and what we have today is the same spirit of Pentecost. Not the same scripture, not the same geographical area, not the same blessings, but the same spirit that was back there has traveled all the way through and hidden Ephraim, or hid the spiritual seed coming all the way through, and the spiritual seed would be separated out and separated out. And now we've come to a time where we went to Sunset Mountain, or we entered into the Son of Man ministry, and we were sent back into the earth not to separate ourselves, but to spread the seed of Ephraim throughout the earth.
Right.
Or to bring forth these spiritual things throughout the entire earth. So we see this going on. So we're discovering our value. Joseph didn't understand his value for a long time. He told dreams he had, dreams of corn stalks bound to him, 12 of them. Dreams of the stars in the heavens bound to him, sun and the moon. His brethren said, "Who in the world do you think you are? You're not the firstborn. You're not anybody. And what you need to understand is Mom and Dad ain't going to bow to you, sun and the moon. And us boys, the stars, we're not going to shut your mouth. You don't have any prophecies, and you're nobody." So then it come a time that they got so jealous of him, he told Jacob to leave them. And Jacob made him a coat of blessing, and the whole world got jealous of that. And when they were out taking care of things, taking care of the flocks and things, in a hole, and many of the brethren were and said, "Don't do that. Don't do that. You'll have the curse of the Lord upon you to kill your brother." Sell him to Egypt. So they sold him to a caravan that was going to Egypt. Goes into Potiphar's house. He was a young man under the blessing of his father, and his father loved him more than any of them. You know how hard that was on him. He goes into Potiphar's house, and about the time that he's starting to get settled in, it takes a few years, and Potiphar's wife tries to get Joseph to go to bed with him. And so I hope you're picking up on things that are happening in the earth today with the Joseph ministry. This is the Joseph blessing upon Ephraim, the firstborn to come second. And so, and what do? They try to mix it up with, Pharaoh called Joseph in and said, "My wife says you tried to rape her." Well, Joseph tried to run from her, and she ripped the coat off of him. Took the coat and said, "Pharaoh, he came into my house and he tried to rape me." And so what happens? Potiphar has him thrown in jail, and Joseph stays there. I don't know how many years, but he stayed there some years. And the butler and the baker came in from Pharaoh, and the butler was spared and went back, and the baker, he said he had a dream and fruit was on his head and birds were coming and picking the fruit out of the basket. And he said, "This is my dream." And Joseph said, "Well, I want to tell you, the butler, he's going to be restored. He's going to go back to Pharaoh's side, and he's going to continue to be his butler. But you, the baker, you're in for trouble. Those birds eating that fruit out of your basket on your head, they're going to take you down here in so many days, and they're going to hang you." And it happened right straight to the day. Well, that set up the prophecy and the dreams of Pharaoh to bring Joseph out of prison and put him on the throne. And still, Joseph not understanding his purpose, not understanding who he was, not understanding that he was going to marry into Egyptians, that he was going to have sons that were Gentiles, they weren't Hebrew, that he was going to not only have sons that would spread throughout the earth and be a blessing, the Ephraimite blessing, he would have the power within him to save the entire nation of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes to the throne after the dreams. They have 7 years of plenty. And with these 7 years of plenty, he's building storage bins, and more storage bins, and they're putting the grain in it, And he said, of all the Egyptians and all of the people that are in the Egyptians and even all the other nations that we have rule over, you bring 1/10 part of all of your harvest in 7 years in a row. We'll put this 10th into storage grains and it will keep us alive.
Mm-hmm.
So he was doing that. Now the 7 years come down to an end, and it come to the blessings of Joseph upon the earth. And what happened was the famines hit. 7 cows, lean cows. And as the famine hit and really began to strike the earth, it was great famine. And Joseph was over there in Egypt, and he had all of those storage bins, and he had set up officers and servants and people to give portions out. But now, Joseph didn't give those out so freely. If you go back and you read, it started out, Joseph said, you bring in parts of your land. Deed off this part. If you have so many acres, you deed off this. If you have so many hectares, you deed off that. If you have so many sons, I get one of them. If you have so many daughters, I get one of them. And he was bringing them in and handing out food and purchasing all the children of the earth. He was purchasing the daughters. He was purchasing the sons. And what's going on right now? Handing out food under the blessings of Joseph and purchasing or bringing to understanding or bringing out a new birthright to all the children throughout the earth. Those purchasing was coming when Joseph started having out the earth, and through Christ we were purchased. Through the bloodline we were purchased. We were bought with a price. So Joseph, it comes down to where they come in and he says, bring in so much water, bring in so much of your children, bring in so much of this and that. And after a while, the people ran out of things to bring in. You're talking 7 years. And Joseph had taken everything from them. He said, I want so much taxes, I want so much, I want a 10th, I want this, I want that. And he was the blessing of Joseph was upon Joseph and his house. And it was pouring in, and the Egyptians, they kept bringing all these things in. And it finally come to a point, Joseph said, when they come in, he said, I want everything you got. Deed off all your land. Give me all your children. Do this, do that. And it's all they could do, or starve to death. So the blessing of Joseph, but it also has a purchasing effect. It also has an effect that pulls them under naturally. They go out with their food, they stay alive. And it brings their whole house, for lack of a better word, their whole house. And that's how, when Egypt got through all of these things that went on, and Egypt got through and all of these deeds went on, that's how Goshen, they looked at it, and they looked at Joseph from us. He took everything from us. He gave us a little meager food here and there, food that kept us alive. And they got all angry and upset, so they made those that lived, they said, you And the blessing of Ephraim went throughout the earth. But what happened was, those that didn't understand their purpose wanted to take the blessing of Ephraim, the blessing of Joseph, those things that were going on, and they wanted to make it into a natural thing. I am a slave, but I'm not a natural slave. I'm a spiritual slave to Jesus Christ. I give him my life. I give him my everything. I give my life to the anointing. I give my life to, and every one of you have done the same thing. And by giving our lives, we get food, and we get blessings, and we get revealer of secrets, and we get all of these things. So it doesn't bother me. In fact, it's a great joy for me to give my life to Christ, who is going to hand me back revelation and understanding and all these things. So here was Ephraim with this hidden secret. And so the famine goes on. And after so many years, Joseph's own sons, or Joseph's own brethren, and his father said, we're going to die. We have nothing left. We've lost most everything. And we hear that in Egypt, they're being blessed. And Jacob said, Reuben, you and Judah, go to Egypt, find out what's going on, and take these things with you and purchase all you can. Because they knew you couldn't go in there without sacrificing what you had. And you can't go in to the blessings of the Lord without sacrificing. So he gave it to Judah and Reuben, and they went, and I think there was one other, there was three of them went the first time. And when they came, Joseph right away recognized, hey, these are my brethren. The blessing of Joseph was now moving upon them. All that they had done to Joseph was to preserve life. All that Tamar done, in all of her ugliness of becoming the prostitute, the whore, the terrible woman who took on the seed of her father-in-law. I mean, that's kind of, well, you know, she did it. It's kind of sick to look at and say, my goodness, you would go into the tent with your father-in-law, you would put on prostitute's clothes, and you'd take a seed from him? Well, to preserve my husband's seed, to preserve my seed, and my seed line to go down through earth, I'll do anything. That's what she thought. And that's what was happening here, is Joseph's sons had sold him. They had wanted to kill him. They had laughed at his dreams. They had mocked him. They had told him he was a nobody. And the first chance they got, they took his beautiful coat of many colors that his father gave him, and they took that and they put it in animal's blood, threw him in a hole, sold him to the caravan going to Egypt, a bunch of Egyptians, and they went back home and said, here's the coat of Joseph. We found it out here, and some animals killed him. And here sits a prophet, Jacob, a major prophet in the Bible, and it's 40 years before he meets up with Joseph again. Just go back and figure out the time and what it says. And it's 40 years before he meets up with Joseph again. So do you know what that prophet was doing for 40 years? Living under a lie, living under deception. Don't you think it can't happen to you? If it's something that's going to bless you and save your seed in the end, and when I say seed, bring you up to your revelation for you, I ain't talking about a natural seed. I'm in the spiritual seed now. And anything to bring that spiritual seed to its light and make it grow, it's going to happen to you. Anything, what you need in the natural will come to you, and in the spiritual will come to you in order to make that seed grow. Whether it's the prostitution, whether it's the hating your brother, wanting to kill him, burying him in a hole, selling him, getting rid of him, and going back and lying to your dad and saying he's dead. So now all of that's coming back to him. And it's coming back to him in two ways. Through the natural line, saying, look at what you did. And through the spiritual line, saying, but it was all good. Everything you did was good. And that's what's happening to us now. we're looking back across everything, and we took on a holy eye. We took on the eye of Ephraim. We took on a blessing of the Spirit, and we're looking at it and we're saying, wow, we come through so much. We came through so much of hatred and jealousy and slavery and ungodliness, and we came through slaughtering and killing. We came through all these things. We came through all these things in my mind of not being good enough, not being worthy enough, not having enough value, not meaning anything, not knowing our purpose, not knowing all these things. We come through all of those feelings, and here we sit at this table, and many of you out there today, and we're saying to ourselves, we are the very blessing of the Lord in the earth. We're saying to ourselves, all of these things that I did, all of these drunken nights that I had, all of these marriages that I went through, everything that I did that looks like you can't even get into the kingdom of heaven because I did it, it's been my greatest blessing. It brought me where I'm at. It made me who I am. And I'm sitting here totally free from all of that condemnation now. How does that happen? Joseph took a look at his brethren the first time he sent them back home. He said, when you come back, he said, have you got any more brethren? Have you got this and that? And they said, yeah. And he said, bring them back. And so when they came back, now Joseph gets to see his son, Benjamin. Or not his son, but his youngest brother. And they all come there together. And Joseph can't refrain himself. He's looking at them. And his revelation is breaking. He's understanding what in the world happened to him. Why he was in the hole. Why he was in Potiphar's house. Why he was given the dreams. Why he was accused of rape, put in prison. Why he was sold to Egypt. All of these things were starting to show up in his mind now. And he's starting to put together all the things that happened to him and realizing that every little minute detail was a mighty blessing of the Lord to wake him up at the right time. It was time for Joseph to wake up. It was time for the blessings of Joseph, his seed line, looking at it naturally now in the spirit. So it was time for the blessings of his seed line to spread throughout the earth. So Joseph is looking at all of them, and he says, yeah, you can go back home. And he puts a little silver cup inside Benjamin's package. Benjamin had his backpack and things. So he put the cup inside Benjamin's backpack. And so they head out, and Joseph then sends men out and says, I've got a silver fallon that's been stolen. And one of you have it. And I know it. And they start checking through all the goods of his brethren. And there it is. The silver fallon or the silver cup in Benjamin's pack. And Joseph told them, the one who you find, you bring him back. We're going to deal with him. Well, he knew it because he recognized his purpose, and he recognized who he was, and he recognized the blessing of Benjamin, which was the right hand of God. You remember when Rachel was dying and having her baby, Benjamin, her last son, she was screaming, and she screamed Benoni, which means bitterness. And Jacob screamed out back at Rachel and said, no, not Benoni, Benjamin, which means the right hand of God. So Rachel was looking at everything as totally bitterness, and Jacob was looking at everything as a blessing and the right hand of God. And we do a lot of the same thing. We look at things in our life, and for years it feels like bitterness and everything else. But when our eyes start opening, we realize that wasn't bitterness at all. That was a blessing of the Lord. It was a blessing that I met Connie, and this happened and that happened. It was a blessing and you just start going through it. It's a blessing that I met Aubrey, and it's a blessing that I met Patty, and it's just and all the turmoil that you went through to get to this point, you say, you know, I went through this and I went through that, but it seems like when I was at my lowest point, I kind of found somebody that loved me. Well, it's all good, isn't it? It's all good. It's all great. It's the blessing of the Lord when we wake up. And here Joseph started recognizing who he was. That he was the kingpin of the whole family. That he was the one thing that would bring the cornerstone to the family and bring it together, and that it would live and it would be blessed of the Spirit. And that's what every one of you sitting out there that have come to this understanding, you come to the understanding that you are the blessing of the Spirit upon the earth. That many do not know their purpose, and even you didn't know your purpose for a long time, but now you can look back across it and you can say, yes, there was a prophecy of Judah, but there's also a prophecy of Ephraim. There's a prophecy of spiritual. There's a prophecy of me as a seed of Ephraim to be blessed in the earth beyond everything else. And the whole second coming of the Lord, the first one was in the body of a man who came out of the seed line of Judah, but the second was in the body of a man named Don Parnell, Alan Copeland, of women named Connie and Patty and Aubrey, and all of these things. The second seed line is a spiritual seed line that moves upon all of us. And it's a great, great, great blessing. So Ephraim, Joseph is looking at them, and he's looking at all of his brethren. He puts the Fallon in the pack of Benjamin. He brings him back. Now they're all coming back, scared to death of what might happen to Benjamin, because they know over Joseph and made their dad believe he was dead. And if they go back and they tell him he'll never see Benjamin again, they said this will bring the gray hairs down upon our father's head and he's going to die. He won't be able to take this. Trying to make things right with what happened with Benjamin. And so Joseph tells them, he puts them in prison, and he is refrain himself. He sees what's going on. He sees that these brethren came to preserve his seed. The same way Tamar went into Judah and preserved her seed. Joseph was put over Egypt, went through all of his hell, went through everything that happened to him in order for this moment. He's looking at them, and he can't refrain himself, and he puts everyone out of the house except for Joseph, his seed line, everything about him. And Joseph screams out and says, I am Joseph. He understands who he is. He screams out and says, and now they're like, uh-oh.
Really in trouble.
We sold this guy. We tried to kill this guy. We laughed at his dreams. We laughed at his ignorance. We laughed at his foolishness as a child. We hid the things from our father. Not only is Joseph going to kill us, but when our father finds out what we did, it'll be the death of him. And Joseph, they thought they were gone. And Joseph said, listen, don't worry about this. He grabbed Benjamin, he hugged him, he loved him with all of his heart. It reunited Joseph and Benjamin, and that happened under Reuben. I could go into a whole lot of that. Reuben is the Aquarian son, and under the Aquarian son, what's taking place right now? We have Reuben, the Aquarian son. We have Joseph and Benjamin. Those two are uniting back together again. Israel and the rest of the world, the natural and the spiritual, it's all uniting back together again, and it's all becoming one. It's one spirit in the earth. It's one Lord, one faith, one baptism. It's neither Greek nor Jew nor male nor female. You can just go on and on and on of all the things that are happening to bring back the uniting of one in this age, because we have recognized who we are, what the blessings were, the things that happened to us and how horrible they were, down through our life, down through our life of the church ages and everything else, we've seen all of these things happening, and now we're in a position to bless the earth. Some people still want to burn them in hell. But I'm telling you, you are in a position that with all of the horrible things that have been done to you by every person, right down to the person that you personally hated the most, you are a blessing to them now. You can open things up. You can open your heart up. You can get rid of the hatred and anger and jealousy and madness and everything else, and you can bring a blessing upon everything around you. Just like the river that Ezekiel saw, and every place that river ran, it was a blessing, and it brought forth. It brought forth herbs. It brought forth this. It brought forth that. And everything the river touched, Ezekiel said, it came to life. That's the blessing of Ephraim upon the earth today through Joseph. Through Joseph and Mary come Jesus. Through the blessing of Joseph today comes all of these great things in the earth. Your waking up, your purpose, your understanding, knowing who you are. So we see Joseph. He reveals to them who he is. He tells them who he is. He hugs Benjamin. He cries out, "Doth my father yet live?" They said, "Yes." He said, "I'm going to send you back. Some of you go back and get him and bring him here." Can you imagine having to face up to that? Hey, Dad, you're going to find out, and you being a prophet and all, please don't curse us. We have been told by your son Joseph that everything happened for good. Could you go home and say, "Dad, we have Joseph"? What? You told me my son was dead. You told me that he was killed. You brought a coat back to me and said, "Take a look at this." But you know what? Revelation was breaking in Jacob's mind. And he realized if his son Joseph had not been sitting on that throne, the nation of Israel would have died in famine. Those 12 boys and all of them. So all of this revelation starts breaking, and it reunites Joseph with his brethren. It reunites Benjamin with Joseph. It reunites Joseph with his father. It starts reuniting everything under revelation. Under the natural look at it, we'd have said, "This bunch of boys need to die." This has happened, that's happened. Under the natural look at it, we'd have said, "This is a total disaster. This family will never get along. They hated one another. They slaughtered one another. They starved one another. They lied to one another. And now the truth's coming out. This family will never get along." But I have a revelation now. I awaken to the blessing of Joseph and Ephraim in the earth, which is the coming of the Lord in me and in you. And I woke up to the fact that I did all of those things to you to make you. And you did all those things to me to make me. And when we come to that revelation and that understanding, our very purpose and everything changes. And Joseph brought his father in, brought his brethren in, had a great feast, and then moved them into Goshen with him. And listen to what the scripture says in this blessing. The scripture goes on to say that none of Goshen had to pay a tenth. None of Goshen had to sign over their land. None of Goshen had to give their sons and daughters up. None of Goshen had to pay taxes. None of Goshen had to do it. Joseph freed his people. He freed them completely.
Right.
And said, "You're free of all this." Can you see how the Egyptians got so angry? It was setting up a deliverance of Israel back to the promised land, and it was doing it by building animosity and anger between Egypt and Goshen, or Israel. So everything is a blessing of the Lord. And here comes Moses 430 years later, and he walks in there and he takes that animosity that was built up for 400 and some years, and he delivers Israel back into her promised land. Or to the Jordan so Joshua could deliver him into the promised land. So everything is working together for a purpose, for an understanding, for an awakening. And when you come to your awakening, and the first feeling that you have, and every one of us are coming to our awakening, is, why did these preachers keep me under this rules and regulations and bondage for so long? Get rid of that feeling.
Right.
Get rid of that feeling. And say to yourself, they were under the same bondage as me. And I love them. And give that blessing of Ephraim out upon them. And for a long time, they may not even know what it is, because they haven't woke up to the purpose of Reuben and Joseph and Benjamin and the reuniting through Ephraim that's going on in the earth. They haven't come to that understanding. They're still separating. They're still pulling away. They're still doing this and that. But you have come to an understanding of who you are, what a blessing you are. And if your hand of blessing is not on something, it's not blessed.
Mm-hmm.
Reach out, forgive, love, say to yourself, they never done it in the first place. This was the Spirit of the Lord, bringing all of these things together, and they never done it in the first place. My brethren loved me. My father loved me. Potiphar loved me. His wife loved me. All of the things that happened, those men in the prison loved me. All of these things, every place I've ever been, they loved me, but they had to do what they did in order to take me to the throne and bring the blessings of my seed line into all the earth, Joseph and Ephraim, and all the way out into the earth. And that's where we're at right now. That love lays there. That's why we can say at the end of this journey, and we've said it before, at the end of this journey, we're going to take our masks off, take our warriors' clothes off, take our everything that we put on to us as a mask of not who we really are, but it needed to happen for the time. We're going to take all that off. We're going to be able to sit down together, have a little tea, a cup of coffee, whatever it might be, and enjoy it and say, good Lord, you fooled me. You really made me believe you didn't love me. But wow, we made it through it, didn't we? I know we woke up to the fact of who we are. So, this great blessing that's upon us and is happening in the earth. Just a little bit of coffee. That cold gets my throat where I want to cough, so I quit drinking. I wrote this down. We're walking home together on the red road of redemption. That's what this is. We're being put into our positions. The red road being blood. We're walking home together on the red road of redemption. Let's stay side by side so we can help one another. That's the way you do it. You know, trees. I forget the name of the tree. Sequoia trees. They have the shallowest roots
Yes.
in the world. They grow the tallest, and they have the very shallowest of roots. So a sequoia tree by itself cannot survive. The wind and the weather will take it down because it has no roots. But what sequoias do is they grow in forests. They grow in groves. They grow together. They stand up together, and that togetherness holds them, and it makes them a strong, strong tree because the roots don't grow anywhere. It's the being together and the loving one another. Well, we've taken on the sequoian spirit into the earth, and we're pulling together. And even though our roots have never been deep in the earth, even though all those things are true, yet we become very strong because we are sequoia trees. And we stand together, walking together, standing together, and helping one another. My father was in the Bataan Death March of World War II. And he told me He said, if you fell down, he said, they didn't worry about picking you up. He said, they hit you in the head and the butt of the gun. They didn't even want to waste a bullet on you. They just crack your skull and leave you there to die. And he said, we saw that. And so he said, every march, as they started us marching, he said, we got as close as we could together. And we helped one another after marching for hours and hours and hours with no water, no anything. We helped one another by holding one another up. He said we were so weak we couldn't hardly walk, but we would stay shoulder to shoulder and align ourselves together to hold one another up side by side so they wouldn't kill you. That was their life, pulling together in all of their weakness. And that's exactly our life. Our roots into this world, because we have lived under the concept of separation, our roots haven't become very deep. And there's one way we can survive. There's one way we can make it through this, and that's if we grow together, if we pull together, and like the sequoia trees, love one another, hold one another up. When the strong winds come, hold one another up. When the storms come, hold one another up, love one another, and stop talking about how weak one another are, and how pitiful this one is, and how this one came out of so much ungodliness they can't have much of Christ about them. And stop doing all that and hold one another up in love, in patience, in weakness. Let's make ourselves strong. Let's be that sequoia tree. So we see this happening. The blessing of Ephraim. If you are a master, be a master unto yourself and free all the others. Then they can excel if you'll do that. And I talked about it before, but this levels the playing field. Joseph come to an understanding that he was a master unto himself. All of these things happen for him. For him alone to become the great thing that he was supposed to be in the earth. And instead of saying, this person done this, and this person done that, and this person I owe, and this person, Joseph said, this was the Lord. And look at the seed. When Joseph took that attitude, look at the seed that was brought forth into his house. Ephraim and Manasseh, the firstborn of the second coming, the great blessing into the earth of Ephraim. And now we have Judah fulfilled. We have Ephraim on the scene, the spiritual aspect of everything. And we see it meshing together now and becoming one. The prophecies of Israel are over. The prophecies of the Gentile nations are over. The prophecies of the 7 church ages are finished. They're done. The prophecies of the Bible are closed up, sealed, and they're put away. And we're standing in another day completely with a whole understanding and thought of a holistic being of what happened to us and how coming all the way through, there was no devil, there was no Satan, there was no demons, there was no this and there was no that. It was all the blessings of the Lord. It was all the Spirit bringing us through it all. And he used the process of the devil, and he used the process of demons, and he used the process of the earth, and a process of church, a process of separation, a process of slavery. He used all kinds of things to make you who you are. And by doing so, now what are you going to do? Are you going to become a master unto yourself? Are you going to say, wow, I have come so far? You know, I heard Bruce Lee one time. He made that statement. He said, that's what kind of got me thinking about it. He said, I am a master unto myself. And I'm not a master to anyone else. And I thought, wow. When you can come to that understanding, as many people as he trained, as great as he was, doing the things that he done, he was saying the only thing I was doing was changing myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to you what you want to do with that. You want to be that example, you want to use the things but I'm not your master. You are your own master. Excel. And by doing so, releasing everyone else, they can excel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he never, all the training that he did, talking about Bruce Lee, he never did make people follow a blueprint pattern of his style. He never followed anybody's either.
Mm-hmm.
He made his own style. He did his own things. He had different moves. And that's why many of them hated him, is because he didn't go after the traditional side of all the different styles that he learned. He learned all of them, and then he acclimated them into who he was. You do the same thing. A person's value and worth are increased when one stops producing replicas of someone else. That's where we're at. We tried to produce replicas of Paul and Irenaeus and Martin, Clement, Luther, and Wesley and Branham. We tried to produce replicas of Baptist, Methodist, Pentecost, on and on and on. We tried to produce replicas of everything and say, this is who I am, when none of it was you. You are your own self. And stop producing these replicas and be yourself. Have an understanding. Come to the blessing of Ephraim. Look at everything that happened as a blessing of the Lord to you. When life and death are no longer learned from a book, but felt in our hearts, then we've understood our creation and our purpose. All things that happen to you, when you can say, that came out of my heart, I needed that to develop. That person didn't do it to me, I'm developing myself. And I drew that person into my life for my development. That person didn't come into my life and then be cruel and mean and angry to me. I drew that person into my life for my development. And look at it as always, life and death are learned from the heart. Be a master unto yourself and level the playing field. Let everyone else become a master unto themselves. Let everyone else learn who they are. Joseph did this. And in all of those blessings, he brought forth those sons, he brought forth that wife, and he produced a seed line that was of Ephraim, the great blessing of the Lord. An open blessing, a full blessing, a holistic blessing, not a Jew, not a Greek, not a male, not a female, on and on and on, not any of those things. A blessing of the Lord, of the Spirit, of who I am, to wake up and say it's all been good. He looked upon all of his creation and said, it is good. My brother Mike is good. We had our ups and downs, but it's all good. And I know he's going to be with me. My brother Greg, rough time, real rough time. Lifestyles, most people would say he's going to burn. But I always held in my heart for him. My wife knows I always treated him well. I acted good around him. I treated him the best I could. And I said, he's being everything he can be. Let's love him. And in the end, he's going to be right there with me. My family, it was some rough times growing up. We weren't rich. We didn't have a lot, but in so doing, what I had, I gave away a lot. I had cousins that had less than me. Our families were poor. I would sneak things out of the house to them. I would give them my clothes. I gave them my shoes. Mom would say, where's this at? I just bought this. I just bought a shirt and I didn't wash it. Where's it at? Where's the box of Cheerios that I just bought that you kids were supposed to have for the week? I knew where it was at. I'd taken it down the street to 4 or 5 little kids that didn't have anything. And they'll be with me. It's a blessing of the Lord in every way when you can just release it. Let it go and say, I'm the master of my own self. I'm going to change myself every day. I'm going to become a better self every day. That's got nothing to do with Alan or Connie or anyone else. They are going to change themselves. I believe they have enough in them to do what they need to do for themselves. And I just want to fellowship. I just want to be together. I just want to love, fellowship, understand who we are. Let the blessing of Ephraim be upon us. Let the rivers of Ezekiel be upon us. Let the awakening of Joseph be upon us. Let the Reuben son pull us together in love and understanding. That's where we're at. We're beyond everything else now because we woke up. So what are we going to do with this awakening?
Serve others.
Amen. Let you say that.
Serve others. That's what we can do with the awakening. Be an example and help others to wake it up, and those that have awakened, we just serve each other. Constantly give to each other to better ourselves.
Everything that's mine is yours. Do you have something?
Yeah. Now we understand. Now we can look back and we can see that when Adam made the choice to transition from spoken word into bloodline humanity, he symbolized something, and so did Eve. He symbolized natural. Eve symbolized spiritual. Then two coming together started it. And what we have seen unfold the entire time is the contrast of natural and spiritual in a cycle together, working its way through every single person's life. It has never left. And sometimes the natural takes the preeminence, and other times the spiritual takes the preeminence. But we had spent so many years trying to separate the two. Now we've come to the understanding that it never has been separated. That cycle of those two, the contrast of the natural and the spiritual combined, Adam and Eve combined, have carried out, and you can't separate them.
That's right.
They are you. You are the natural. You are the spiritual. And you can take all the scriptures, you can see it unfold in different ways, and the way Jesus understood this, when he said it finished, he was saying we're closing the door on the natural and we're opening the door on the spiritual. When he said it's finished, the natural started closing. When he rose back up, the spiritual started rising back up. There was a transition taking place at that time.
That's right.
And then in the moves from that point on, sometimes the natural would step forward and sometimes the spiritual. But it's never been apart. It goes on every day in everyone's life. And when you can see that, you'll stop looking at people as not spiritual or just natural or vice versa. You realize they are both. Now, they may be projecting one aspect more than the other. They may be living out of that understanding more to one side than the other. But they're still using both because you can't get away from it.
That's right.
You can't get away from it any more than your body can get away from having blood and oxygen both needing. You take one or the other away and the body dies. You have to have them both. It's the same thing. And now we can look back and see that. And we can see the way the line carried, the natural and the spiritual have always been.
That's right. Yes. If you remember some time back, I took it out of a message of William Branham's, which I'd have to go back and look the message up again. I think it's The Way of a True Prophet. But he brought the natural and the spiritual resurrection and tied them together and said they're the same thing.
Yep. That's it.
As we're resurrecting in the spiritual, we are pulling the body right with us,
Yep.
bringing it out of graveyards, graveyards of denomination, tradition, everything else. I'm pulling my body right along with my spiritual understanding. And it's not two resurrections, it's one resurrection coming together.
Yep.
That's what's happening.
Yeah.
We've come to that time that Ephraim is upon us. The blessing of Ephraim is upon us. The blessing of the firstborn is upon us. Judah is fulfilled. Listen to me. Israel, someone said, that nation of Israel over there is the seed line of Abraham, the Lord. They are not. The first coming is finished. Judah is finished.
Yep.
Judah and all of his prophecies are finished. There's not going to be a nation over there to excel and become the rulers of the world. There is a nation under prophecy, just like Peter. Isaiah looked and saw Pentecost and he said, behold, a nation is born in a day. Yeah, it was. In a day, on the day of Pentecost, a great nation was born. There is prophecies of a nation being born, but those prophecies are spiritual. It's a spiritual nation, and there's no natural nation going to rise above one another again and become what it was throughout history in the Old Testament. Now, it is spiritual rising, and as we rise, we bring all with us. Everything we bring with us with great understanding, with purpose, with love for one another.
And every age has that too. If you want to look at it, the Aquarian age starts out in a natural process and transforms into the spiritual process. It doesn't mean that it uses the natural first and then there's no more natural. No. It just means it starts out with the natural leading, and then as the transition takes place, the spiritual starts leading. The natural is still a part of it, but it's on the back side of it. It's not on the front side anymore. Yes. And every age has it. The Aquarian age, same way. Starts out with that natural birth, transitioning and opening up the spiritual, and when it finishes out, the spiritual spirit of the Aquarian age will have the preeminence, and then it'll start all over with the Capricorn, and it'll start natural and go right through spiritual.
Yes. And when we understand that, we can get a good look and understand that it's a cycle, just exactly like all those other cycles that we've gone through. When you cycle around and hit that peak spiritual, you're going to come back around and cycle into a natural, because you got to bring all this with you.
Yes.
And you just keep running a cycle around and around from spiritual to natural, just continual cycle, bringing everything with you. Amen. Anything else?
Like the pendulum.
Pendulum.
Yeah, it goes like that, but always come back to the center.
Yes. That's right. And I was thinking about, I don't know what you call them, but I remember seeing them. You had all those little balls hanging on the string. You take one ball, and it hits, and the other one goes out, and it comes back and hits the other. And I was watching a guy who got a bunch of those set up at a fair somewhere, Indiana, I think. And he got them set up to the point to where they, I liked it because it done full circle. It would hit, and the centrifugal forces of it, this one would come around and hit that one. This one would come around and hit that one. And it was just a constant circle going around and around and around. And I thought, now this is even neater. The pendulum, like you said, it swings you so far, but this centrifugal force, bang, complete circle, hits again, complete circle, hits again. And he had a whole room full of them. I was like, 25 of them going, and it was really neat to watch. So that's what's going on now. Full circle, around and around and around, cyclical, from one thing to the next. And we've gone through so many of those cycles. We can see them and we understand them. So we have a great blessing upon us. The blessing of the Spirit, which Ephraim was a symbol of. The blessing of the Spirit in a spiritual way upon us. And He'll pull us through naturally through that spiritual blessing.
11:30.
Okay. Yeah. You want to play a couple songs, or can you?
Choke something out.
You can sing again.
How do we explain? How into our hearts. You know, as Brother Atori speaks, he's always speaking from his heart, and his hearts. Plural. Just listen, you'll be fine. All around us, things are changing. Seasons come and seasons go. Very few things last forever. Deep within our hearts, we know we're forever friends, bound by love that time can't take away. Forever friends, caring in a special kind of way. Heart to heart and hand in hand, we will stand until the end. Love forever when you're forever friends. All sisters, we're all brothers in our love and in our care. And the spirit that's within us is a love. Forever friends, bound by love that time can't take away. Forever friends, caring in a special kind of way. Heart to heart and hand in hand, we will stand until the end. Love's forever when you're forever friends, bound by love that time can't take away. Forever friends, caring in a special kind of way. Heart to heart and hand in hand, we will stand until the end. Forever when you're forever. Love's forever when you're forever friends.
Amen. We'll all stand, and I hope it's been enjoyable. I know sometimes when you get into this teaching, you have to think and go home, think more on it, and say to yourself, you know, that does kind of fit. So that's where we're at. Is these things are fitting in for us. She go to the restroom.
She disappeared on me.
I'm just talking slowly, thinking
Yeah.
she'll come back.
What happened to her?
I know she would love to be here. These things, think on what we've talked about. Think about the love that's pulling us together. The terrible turmoil. In all of that, there was the greatest hand of blessing in it that could possibly be. And in all of your turmoil inside your own mind, the family of your body, and the family out here in the earth, everything, it all ties together into you. And look at it that way and know that all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord Jesus and are called according to his purpose. When you pick up the purpose, you'll see that love came through all of it. So we have a great blessing upon us. Holding hands here together, we put our energy together. We trust that in the authority of Christ, if there's healing in this circle, and all of you that are in the circle with us, if there's financial blessings, we ask for it, we want it. Joseph left the great stress of Egypt off of his people Goshen. And the stress of this world, we ask that it be off of us, and we're able to just spread the blessing that is upon us. all the things that happen to us financially, spiritually, naturally, we ask that we would understand every blessing now. It would open up every purpose to us and all the things that we are in healing, in love, in peace, in every way. In the name of Christ, we stand here trusting in these things.
That's right.
Yes. What a great blessing.